the new beginning of these women's lives be more successful? In your opinion, what seems to be what's lacking most?
25% of all the offenders that we have there today will be released within the next 25 months. Half of the intake that we received in the last year had less than 6 months to serve. They serve some jail credit and they come in and they have less than a year and a day to serve. We start transitioning them for release the minute they get into the facility. And one of the things the community members can do is just stay connected. We have visiting, we have video visiting, we have JPay visiting, which is kind of like an email text thing. You talked about new beginnings, and I think corrections is also starting a new beginning. In the last few years, corrections is really becoming very evidence-based with our programs and our policies and our procedures. And I think it's a time where we know what can reduce recidivism and what works for offenders getting released. And one of the things that points to is staying connected and visiting and having pro-social people that they can connect with. So I think the biggest thing they can do is just stay connected with them, and then when they transition out to the community, we have some struggles around housing and employment and things like that. So just, I think it's more of a mentoring role, just to be there for them when they get released.
He talked about some of the services connecting with, once they get out, making sure that the connections are there for housing. Can you talk a little bit about what your services are at Goodwill Easter Sale for housing and how that connection can happen with these families today?
So housing is one of the most complicated and complex area we're currently struggling with. I think a lot of programs are struggling with housing related resources, but at Goodwill Easter Seals we have various services for individuals who are transitioning. We offer anything from employment training to connecting them with like a career pathway rather than a job for now. When you think about somebody transitioning, a $10 an hour is not really going to cut it, right? And so we believe in a career-based opportunity where we put them through various training opportunities that leads to a career pathway, meaning when you have a stable employment, chances are you can have a stable housing too. So the main goal is to get them in a employment opportunity that will stabilize their finances so they can stabilize housing. But housing is very difficult. But recently we heard some great news. There are some great investors out there who are working on getting individuals that are transitioning to become homeowners. So we're working on a few things and hopefully that will come through.
Okay.
Start anew is, well, we don't do the housing piece yet. We're working on getting that. But I was incarcerated. And when I came, while I was there, I met a lot of women that didn't have a lot of things. They didn't have support, which is good. What he said is support is really good when your family's visiting you or if you're getting mail, that's really good. It keeps you connected to the outside world. Getting a job is good also, but and home ownership is awesome too. I have a home right now. I have a degree. I'm working on my second degree. I have this business, but I contract myself out at the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. So work is good, but you're not going to be able to get a house right away. There's a little bit of work in getting a house, but two, you need a place to stay. So actually, it's hard to get a place to stay. As you can see, people are asking you questions on your application. Do you have criminal history? What's your credit score? So that's a real big barrier. So my suggestion as far as that goes, talk to your Congress people. Push bills that don't allow for you to be discriminated against because you have criminal history, because just because you broke the law does not mean you don't deserve a place to stay.
And that's a very good way, because a lot of times, one of the things that a lot of decisions are made for all of us through our legislators, and you have to be a part of that system if you want to see change come into place. So you have to be involved in that. You can find out when different bills are being discussed on the floor so that you can be there, so that you can just check on the city's website, on the state's website, and kind of educate yourself that way. Because the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. So what the city said is right. I mean, there's a lot of the ways that you can try to get involved, but that is the most important way. If you want policy differences to happen, you have to be an advocate for the people that you're talking about. 11 nonprofits benefit, what's the rest of that sentence?
How many nonprofits benefit from correctional facility for the inmates who work in those facilities? How many nonprofits are making money off of that workforce?
We're gonna need the mic, where's the mic?
That's a great question. Before I get to that, I'll introduce my colleagues that came in here with me, Ms. Jorgensen and Mr. Behrens. I guess the answer is I have no idea. I don't know how many nonprofits. I do know we have 450 volunteer groups that come in and provide volunteer services to our offenders. I'd say less than a handful, Carly.
I'm wondering if you can provide a little clarification on your question. Was there something specifically, like, is there a specific organization that you're wondering about, or just in general?
In general, my understanding is some of the work that's done by prison inmates is done for nonprofits.
So you're speaking about the work, so their
The
work
work that the
sites
offenders
is what,
do?
she's speaking to work sites.
Yes.
Okay, so when offenders come in, we have about a 7% idle rate, which what that means is that all offenders are employed or working or in some type of programming all day long, except for about 7%. And that's very, very low in a correctional setting. The offenders are either in treatment, they're either in treatment, or they're working, you know, in the cafeteria, or they're in education. If you don't have a GED or high school diploma, you'll go to school, or they're in vocational training, or they're in our industry program. There's 2 industry programs that are called PI programs that the MinCorp industries. One is Anagram program, which is the balloon program that's in a lot of facilities, and the other one is Rubber Industries, where they do some assembly work for Rubber Industries. So I would say in that context, it would be 2.
So no nonprofits.
No nonprofits in that area, just the 2 for-profit, the MinCorp and the Anagram and Rubber Industries.
Thank you.
I've got questions for you guys, because they're talking about this, the Shakopee facility. But I also want to give the other 2 panelists an opportunity to address some questions, because I think as much as it's intriguing to know about what goes on with this, with the facility and some of the rules, I get that. But also we want to make sure that some of the questions that help us once they come out. Because our goal is to not know so much about what's happening while they're in there, because they're only in there, you said a year, guy?
Our average length of stay is about 36 months, but like I said, about 75% will be released within the next 2 years. So there's this called this movement of offenders in and out of Shakopee, and then there's this long-term group of offenders who are serving longer sentences. So Shakopee is very rich in programs and transitions and things of that nature, because offenders are going to leave and they're going to get out. One thing I'll show quickly is Harley brought me. This is the adult pre-release handbook. It's on our website, and you can download this. But it deals with the offenders in terms of, they all go through this in chapter. I'll just go through the chapters real quick. Identification, and that's very important to have proper identification when you get released. They talk about life skills, housing, education, transportation, living under supervision, family, health, money management, and employment. So this is kind of the guidebook that the offenders go through regarding pre-release classes, and I can leave that with Mr. Richardson if you would like.
So now, Guy, let me just ask you, because you did just touch on one of the questions. So are people held over, when you talked about you have housing as a part of that program that you was just reading, are they held over to stay if they have nowhere to go?
They are not.
Okay.
So offenders serve 2/3 of their sentence in and 1/3 on community supervision. They can lose a little bit of that supervision time with institutional misconduct, but the offenders that come in on their initial term of incarceration serve 2/3 in. They're given their release date the day they come in. They know when they're going to leave, and then they might lose a day or 2 or more if they have some misconduct. If they got out and they come in as a release violator, that means they're serving a little bit of that supervision time. Some of those without proper placement might be held until they have proper placement, but they've already been released one time.
I'm going to move to talk a little bit more about resources here. Can you have more than 2, can you visit more than 2 people now? I know there used to be where if you came to visit Cecilia, you couldn't visit Tracy.
Yeah, there's policies around being on multiple offender visiting lists, but there's exceptions to that policy, and the warden or myself can make exceptions to that rule. So if there's somebody that has 2 people incarcerated at the same facility or more than 1 person at different facilities, there is an exception to that rule, just have to know about it, we have to approve it and sign off on it, and we do that. But the policy states that it can only be on one person's visiting list, but we do make a lot of exceptions to that rule.
And so how would one get a hold of you if they wanted to attempt to visit two different women up there at Shakopee?
More than one. There's an email address they can email it to, or they can just call the facility main number and ask for visiting staff. And then it kind of goes through that process. You know?
Great. Give us some help on how can we get, what kind of resources are you going to be most helpful at calling the Easter Seal to get resources? What seems to be the questions that families really need the most help with and that you're able to help them?
Most of the time, the individuals transitioning are the ones who directly approach us. Families normally don't reach out to us, but in case that they do, I mean, having an understanding of the criteria that need to be met in order to qualify for the program is a huge start. So when calling different organizations in regards to resources, make sure you ask about what type of criteria need to be met in order for the person to qualify for the program. Meaning, some programs like ours, for example, you have to be 25 and older. You have to not have prior sex offenses, and just pretty much various things need to be met in order to qualify for our program, along with other organizations as well. So just knowing those criteria in advance would be beneficial and helpful.
Okay.
From the resource end, we do a lot of things, and it varies from person to person. The unique part about our program is we don't technically make a decision for the participants who come through our program. We ask them what they need from us as practitioners. In a sense, that is like, do you need your license reinstated? Do you need, because we know in order to keep a stable employment, you need to be able to get from one place to another. Most individuals transitioning spend majority of their time on transportation. If you're looking at, they have employment opportunities in the suburban areas, but that's 3 to 4 hours just on commute. And that's very complex and difficult for people to do. So we make sure if the chances of getting them a driver's license, then that would be a priority thing that we work on. If getting identification, social security cards, and birth certificates are something that's on their list, then we make sure we take care of those things with them too. But just knowing the priority areas to work on from the get-go, so we're not going backwards, but moving forward.
Okay. So there are occasions that one must meet before you're able to assist them with some help.
Yes.
Okay.
And if we're unable to serve them due to those criterias, then we also have other partners that we could refer them to.
That was going to be my next question. Thank you. So Cecilia, tell us a little bit about the services that you could assist one with. You mentioned that your services are focused more on the younger adults.
Well, we work with women 15 and older, and that's just because my daughter, some of my cousins, juveniles, they were acting like they were grown too. So I was like, well, we better drop our age down a little bit, but we work with 15 and older. So we don't drop, if you're 65, you only have to have criminal history for us to work with you. And criminal history, you don't have to be released from prison, because a lot of people think that even when you're looking for a job, the box says, have you been convicted of a crime? It does not say, did you go to prison? Because so women, we're working with women, because those are issues also, because you do have the criminal history. And then we also change some of the wording, because offender or ex-offender, that's like putting a label on you. You already got your self-esteem is not that great when you get out or break the law and get convicted. So we try to come up with different words that will make the transition, whatever transition it is, a little bit easier, where you're not labeled, because I don't call myself an ex-offender. I made a couple mistakes, and I paid for my mistakes, and I'm doing whatever it is that I need to do to move forward. So we have our group, well, one of our groups we do have, it's a mentoring group. It's called It's Okay to Be You. And we meet on Wednesday nights. We're going to start meeting on Mondays, though. And it's a faith-based group also. So every week when we meet, they're fed. that we have resources, and we are not trying to reinvent the wheel where I'm going to tell you, okay, this is the training. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you, this is, we're going to look and find what you need, because I'm not going to do it for you, because you need to learn how to advocate for yourself also. So I'm going to look with you. You're going to make your decisions on, do you want to go to Twin Cities Rise? Do you want to go to Goodwill Easter Seals? What skills do you need to get where you're trying to go? What's your next destination? And we do things also that a lot of women that have legal history are not used to doing. One time we went to Chuck E. Cheese. We didn't take kids, we went to Chuck E. Cheese. So we're trying to have some fun. We're also trying to make the transition easier by letting you be who you are.
Because you talk about the connectivity of people with the inmates as they're transitioning to come out. So this question is, does Shakopee have an open invitation to community members who want to come in and connect with the women by way of speaking or being able to just communicate with them? If they don't have family, then you got people that want someone that would come and visit them. I guess that would be something that they may be asking here. And if not, are you considering doing that? And she's talking not about organizations that already have that relationship, but individuals.
So if I understand the question correctly, so we do have about 450 volunteers that come in and provide a multitude of services for the offenders. When I do get calls from people that want to come in and provide an array of services to the offenders, and we have a program proposal that we have them fill out. And the reason why we fill that out is because we want to make sure that the reason why somebody's coming in and meeting with the offenders is aligned with our mission and the evidence and the support of what we're doing. You know, corrections, we can do a lot of good in corrections, but if we don't do it right, we can also do some damage, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So if somebody wanted to come in and just spend some time as a volunteer, I would have them kind of reach out to our volunteer services coordinator, and there is all sorts of programs they can come into. If part of the question was that they wanted to come in and just randomly pick an offender to visit with, we don't have anything like that. I would be nervous about that because there's a lot of vetting that goes on. A lot of our offenders, about 70 or 80%, have some mental health issues. About half the offenders are on a psychotropic medication. So we want to make sure that everybody that comes in the facility and interacts with the offenders, that it's done in a way that is meaningful and mindful, because we have a lot of programs at Shakopee. We're programmed full from 7 in the morning until 9 at night if they want to stay busy. So I would just need to see it in a program proposal form so we can make sure that it folds in with what we want to do or what we're doing.
Okay. And then do they go up to the prison and talk to people through your organization? So if they wanted to have a different portal to get to have this opportunity to engage?
We do a lot of internal work in regards to like transitional affairs. As far as volunteers, like we're connected with the Minnesota Second Chance Coalition, where we advocate on a bigger scale, connecting with the legislators, making sure the bills that represent the people hopefully pass. Restore the Vote being one of them this year, fines and fees, and the other one is probation period. And so we do various things, but Goodwill Easter Seals directly doesn't have, at least with the reentry program to be exact, we don't have just random volunteers coming in for whatever reason. We do have like mentoring group, financial literacy, and possibly now home ownership opportunities for individuals transitioning. But then again, like all those things, it's a process. You know, they have to go through like a volunteer coordinator or something like that prior to coming in to connect with our participants, if that answered your question.
It did, and that was going to be kind of the question too, because it was a twofold question kind of, but that was the other question was, do you offer opportunities for volunteers that connect directly with incarceration and people coming back out? So that's the question.
So our mentoring piece is a pretty big piece. Our reentry program has been around for 12 years now, and we believe mentoring is a huge component of our program. And so we used to have volunteer mentors connect with participants on a one-on-one base. We do group mentoring, but that one-on-one piece is huge. So if individuals are interested in the mentoring piece and being a mentor on a one-on-one base, that's something that they would have to go through our volunteer coordinator to kind of get that going.
Jay, you said something about a transitional fair? Is that like a job fair? Or?
So the transitional fair is where staff go into Shakopee and other prisons to provide individuals who might be getting released within 6 months or so with employment opportunities and resources to kind of help them get that kickstart, as we call it, so they have the resources prior to release.
Yeah, which is very helpful, because once they get out, that's when it's probably a little bit more harder, because they get more frustrated, so.
And there's more than like Goodwill Easter Seals people there. I mean, I've seen a lot of wonderful organizations show up endlessly and dedicate their time making sure those resources are available for people to have a successful transition.
And one of the things that we do have there, most of you should have on your table in front of you, is the program. On the back of the program, we also have resources that the MSR had came up with just prior to the meeting this afternoon. So that's just the start of the list of our resources, and we'll be adding to that list. Guy, a question is, how can an organization get involved in facilitating support groups at the facility to make connections and provide transition resources to the people who are incarcerated?
It would be the program proposal worksheet they'd have to fill out, so they would contact me. I would have them send them a program proposal. We have a committee that looks at that, and we either say yes or no or maybe, or some things that need to change. But everything kind of goes through that form, and that form should be attached to our policy. So they fill that out, and it says what resources you're gonna need, dates you're gonna come in, time, how big the groups, and all of that has to be really looked at very strictly to make sure that the people coming in, that it's the right stuff. The transition fair, to talk about that, it's held in our gym. It is, it's tables about this size all the way down and around the entire gym and 2 rows down the middle. It is an awesome event, and there is 50 different vendors that come in. Can you just name some of them, give an idea of some that come in?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's coming up next month, and it's an annual event. So every adult facility has a transition fair annually. We kick it off every season in Shakopee. We're very grateful for that. And we do have a huge turnout there, but everything from, housing resources and employment, but also there are some other individuals who come in just to talk a little bit about support and programming in the community, that women who are seeking some additional support or have some really specific things that they're hoping to get prior to release, so they know where they can head as soon as they hit the door. So the transition fair is in April, and it's usually very well attended by the women. They're very grateful for all the people who come.
We also have a health services fair for the women, the same concept, but it focuses on healthcare and health-related topics for women, and that happens at all the facilities, and that is in the same format as the transitions fair.
Yeah, a lot of the things you have listed on the back here come in for that transitions fair. So, Vivo, Amicus, we actually have a couple of Hennepin County POs that come in. They have a table so they can talk about supervision, Goodwill, Salvation Army.
What's a PO?
Probation or parole officer. So,
Okay.
some of the Dress for Success, that's a really popular one with our boot camp program. So,
Okay.
Clarification, are organizations from communities of colors often participating in these fairs? Okay.
One more question. The Dress for Success that you refer them to, is there a fee attached to that, entering that program, and do they, with a fee?
I don't believe so.
no.
No fee for that, okay.
Does Shakopee have a no-touch policy when people are there to visit their loved ones?
Yes, I believe
For visiting?
you get it.
Yeah.
They can embrace, you can have a brief embrace.
A brief embrace.
A brief, so you can hug for a minute. You just ain't holding on.
Not a
to
minute.
it.
And kiss on the cheek.
Oh, a real quick hug.
Yeah, not a minute.
So it's not a minute.
We also have a parenting program which mothers can be in, and they can have extended visits with children, and we have that in a place now in the visiting room, so there's a little more freedom for them to interact and play games and hold hold their babies and stuff like that.
Okay, so, cause that was the question, someone just said, why is Shakopee a no-touch facility? So that's why I asked, is it a no-touch facility?
So the question is, are you referring to the visiting policy, or are you referring to the no-touch policy of the general population?
General population.
So we are a no-touch facility in general population. Offenders are not allowed to touch another offender. The Prison Rape Elimination Act was enacted in the 90s, and the Bureau of Justice and Statistics did a survey, and Shakopee scored very, very high on consensual relationships in the correctional facility. So we hired a consultant, the Andy Moss Group. It's her consulting company. They did a kind of a sexual assessment of our facility, and they found a high rate of self-reporting from offenders that there was a lot of inappropriate touching. So when that happened, we went to a no-touch facility. With that now, though, we have recognized that we'd like to, a little nervous about it, but we want to kind of back off of that, you know, because there is instances where touch is healthy and there's the hugs and things like that. So Carly's implementing a healthy relationships curriculum, and once we launch the healthy relationships curriculum, we believe that we will back off on their strict no-touch status, because, you know, sometimes government, we overreact, and the no-touch policy was probably an overreaction to the self-reporting high rate of consensual relationships in the prison. But we are working towards, we are recognizing that, and we're working towards drawing that back. But we're a little nervous about it, because if, you know, we want to make sure that we don't have anybody victimized there, and that so we want to do it. We want to do it right, but it is coming, and it's on our radar, and we talk about it a lot.
Sure, that maybe their families are knowing that you guys are trying to institute and kind of keep us abreast out here, what our loved ones might be going through in there, and kind of being able to, because maybe it's like, we're talking to them about what's going on out here, but maybe they're not aware of some of the programs inside, or they're just kind of oblivious to what's going on to work and benefit them. So how can we have that open communication going back and forth?
I think the best way is our website. There was actually, about 5 years ago, we did a video. We were the first probably facility or in the country when Prison Rape Elimination Act came out, that we hired a professional video company to do a video. It wasn't for the offenders, and it wasn't for the staff. It was for the family to watch in regards to what we provide at Shakopee in regards to prison rape elimination. So that's just one of the videos on there. But our website has a lot of publications, has a lot of videos, and you can certainly call. We have offender newspaper. Can they get subscribed to our offender newspaper, I believe?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The
Reflector?
Yeah, we have the Reflector. It's an offender-driven newspaper or newsletter, and you can subscribe to that and mail it to your house. I think other facilities have that option as well. So I suppose our website would be the best.
Go.
So is it just the corrections website, or is it Shakopee's?
There's a corrections website, and then it has a facilities tab, and you tab down to Shakopee, and then that opens up. And there's also tabs for publications, recent research, events, things like that.
So say that one more time, guys, the website.
It's on your card.
Is it on my card? Yeah. Can I borrow my card? It's mn.gov /DOC.
Okay, great. Some of the things when you were incarcerated that helped you to transition to come out, and I know you originally were, before you started your own organization, you did some work at Twin City Rise. So how did you make that transition from being incarcerated to Twin City Rise? And was that an easy transition, or was that problematic?
Actually, I started preparing while I was incarcerated, and I don't know if Shakopee does that or not, but a lot of prisons, I guess, are trying to work a little bit with you more on your going home. And I started, like, I applied for Section 8 while I was there. I applied for everything. I was a mail-aholic. I had stamps. I was doing programming, but I made a decision that, okay, this is it. I'm done. I cannot do this again. So I started preparing for what I needed to do. And then when I got home, I went to Twin Cities Rise because I was in the halfway house, and they were trying to make me work right away, and I was like, I didn't want to do that because I knew I had office skills already, but my crime wasn't going to let me go work at a bank or something like that. So I had to get some other skills. I got skills while I was in prison. I got my paralegal certificate. I got a certificate in forklift operating. I got a certificate in framing and cabinetry because I was like, okay, somebody's going to give me a job when I get home. And so, like I said, I started preparing, and I took all that training, and then I went to Twin Cities Rise, and my PO, he said, you know, it's going to be hard for you to get a job with that background. And I was like, yeah. And my coach, he was like, you know, it's going to be hard. So they were preparing me for the nose. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm ready for the nose. And everybody should, with criminal history, needs to be prepared to hear some no's, because if you're not prepared to hear that, as soon as you hear a couple of them, you're going to get frustrated and irritated and I'm done, I'm going to start selling dope again or whatever it is you're going to do. But I guess they were preparing me, but I have this bubbly personality. So I was at the front desk interning, and they said, do you like it? I was like, yeah, it's all right, you know. And they said, the pay is not great. I said, I was making 17 cents an hour, so what's the pay? And they said what they were paying. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling like Donald Trump now. He wasn't the president at the time. But I was like, okay, yeah, awesome. I'm going to take this job. And then they kept me there, and then I said I made goals for myself. So I was determined. I said I'm going to move up and not stay at this front desk. And I went on to be a recruiter and then a community engagement liaison. And I kept on training. I went to school, but I also took other trainings. Every training that they said that I could take for free, I took it. So that was for me, but that's not for everybody. And what people need to understand is that this is an individualized process. This is not a one-size-fits-all. So it depends on what a person likes to do, what a person wants to do. And so, like at Start Anew, like I said, our group, It's Okay to Be You, women feel free to talk, and they tell us the problems. They tell me the problems that they had, because I guess I've been there where they've been. And then I do give them resources so that, like I said, they can start looking for their own stuff. And even though I didn't say this part, we do pre-incarceration consultations. So if you want to know what's going to happen to you at prison, or your family or whatever, you can call me, tell me where you're going. I'm going to do whatever questions you want to know. I'm going to do that research for you, and then you're going to get back to me, and I'm going to give you your answers. And we do charge for that, but we do sometimes not charge people for things that we do. It depends on if they can afford it or not.
Gain your parental rights once you've lost it. And I would assume at that point you're talking that you're incarcerated and you lost your rights.
I think every case is unique, and I would assume, yes, we have a full-time parenting coordinator, but yes, through the social services, I'm assuming that people, I mean, it's not really something that we focus on at Shakopee. We have a full-time parenting coordinator that help navigate all the social service stuff around childcare and around visitation and around petitions and all those things, but I don't know specifically, but I'm assuming, yes, somebody that has lost their parental rights can get them back.
And I'm sorry, I need to interject.
That all depends.
Because that's an unfair question for him, because he's not in charge of that, the state of
Well,
Minnesota.
he answered it to the best of his ability.
Yeah,
We ain't nobody up your guy. They don't look like him.
Mm-hmm.
So we're okay with that. We just know that they can answer to the best of their ability.
I would add, so Lori, our parenting coordinator, does a really nice job when she cannot address something. We have lots of resources, and we refer individuals to appropriate individuals who can. But we do have an ombuds person who comes in specifically for the Native American women who are facing child custody issues and helping them navigate the ICWA system. But all of the women who have any concerns about child custody matters that are pending, past, or wondering about reunifying with children, we have an individual who is fantastic at navigating that with them. So if we cannot answer it, she will find who can and help people get the answers they need.
And I think it's a nice shout out to you know, we get the resources from the legislative process, and to have a full-time staff as a parenting coordinator, full-time, that's all they do, it is really great. So you know, we have 257 staff and all these volunteers, so there's a lot going on in Shakopee.
In terms of terminology, they said, can a different word be used instead of offender?
You know, I get asked that question. It's a good question. I get asked that a lot, and you go back in time in corrections philosophy in the Department of Corrections across the country, and the terminology changes. I think, what was it, 100 years ago? You were called people were called a convict, and then when I started, it was inmate, and then it changed to an offender, and even in other avenues, people. Children with certain disabilities, and all those terminologies change in time. I think offender will change in time. I was in a legislative subcommittee our goal was to pass legislation to not handcuff pregnant offenders, and that passed, and we don't handcuff pregnant offenders. It was interesting because I was sitting around the table with an attorney, and with a doctor, and with a corrections person, and with somebody from social services, and everybody was talking about the same person, but we were all we were all using different terms. So I was saying offender, the attorney was saying client, the doctor was saying patient. So I think we're already starting to go there, and I think at some point around the country, I hear the word client a lot. Not in Minnesota, I haven't heard that yet, but I think nationally, there's conversations out there that offender will go away, but I think it's just a matter of time. I don't know what word will replace it, but I do hear the word client more often now than I have ever before.
Oh, we got a question.
No, I don't. I was just
Oh, you
going
wanna
to make a
say something? You wanna
statement
add
that, Dakota County calls their people there. They call them visitors. And they do a lot of programming too, and they called it, because while I was at Twin Cities Rise, I did go to the prisons and whatnot, so I've been back in on the other side, and they do call them visitors. And when I was in federal prison, they called me Miss Stanifer. So they called us by our last names, Miss, and they put a Miss in front of it. So like he said, it's a doable thing. It just depends on if somebody's going to say something about it. Because when I was at Shakopee, and they did call them offenders, and I was like, first of all, you got to recognize, like you say, if you call your child dumb all the time, their kid is going to think they're dumb. And if you keep using these words for people, offender, that might even cut down, I'm not saying it will, but it could possibly cut down on recidivism, because if I'm not thinking I'm an offender and I'm something else, I was a visitor or whatever, then maybe I'll change my outlook on stuff.
When I enter a room, like the dining room, and there's a group of, I'll say good morning, ladies. I mean, we don't say good morning, offender. And when I'm going to talk to somebody, I'll say Miss Smith. I don't say offender Smith. So that's pretty common.
Okay, so guys, what other things do y'all offer that are simpler, like that offer hands-on training for women, so when they come out, like Cecilia mentioned earlier, she learned how to do woodcrafting, or she learned how to run a computer, or whatever. What does Shakopee offer the women that are visiting, so that when they're prepared to come out, they have some type of skill that they didn't maybe have before they came in?
So our visitors, changed today. So visitors at Shakopee.
We've already
So the most popular program, I guess, would be our cosmetology program. It's a 24-month program. It's the same certificate that anybody would get. It's licensed by the state of Minnesota. That's how the visitors get their hair done, and that's how they, feel good about themselves. And so that's a program there. Office support, they can go and get an office support certificate. There's some light manufacturing things that they can do to get jobs. The transition center helps them from everything from vacating some fines. Some counties will vacate some fines. They teach them how to, or they instruct them and help guide them how to answer that question in a job interview when they get asked that. They help them prepare a resume. We do mock job interviews. I've done some of those over in our Challenge Incarceration program. They go down to Dress for Success. So there's a lot of certificates they can get. If you work in our food services area, you can get a Serve Safe certificate. So we're all about providing certificates and things that they can put in a portfolio when they get out to help that. Did I answer? Did I get all of them? So, chemical dependency, high school diploma, GED, college classes, moving on certificate in a group, surviving or beyond trauma, beyond violence, all all programs. That
How many of the visitors actually attend these different opportunities and take advantage and don't come back versus those that don't take advantage and continue to come through the revolving door?
Well, you know, when it started, you were talking about new beginnings, and I think corrections a few years ago, that's a good new beginnings. I think it's a good term. And in the female facility, the women there really want to participate in program. They enjoy participating in program. They sign up, and we have more problems trying to cut the list down than to try to find people to go. They just, you know, but with the evidence, we have to look at the evidence-based practices and our validated risk needs assessment, because some low-risk offenders don't need program, and if it's the wrong program, can actually harm them rather than make them better. And some high-risk offenders, it's not going to do anything for. So there's kind of this part in the middle that we really want to focus on. So I think versus the male facilities, we have no problem. We put out a program, it's full. They're going to take it, and we don't have to worry about it.
Nice. Yeah.
I wanted to say something about the labeling, and then I wanted to clarify something about visiting. There was a hearing held at Stillwater. It was one of the first in the nation for a legislative hearing to be held inside of a prison. And a writer of the Stillwater Prison Mirror actually had written several articles in September and October issue referring to inmates and offenders as residents.
Oh.
And that was actually picked up by many of the legislators and some of the news reporters that word actually coined. And when they came for the hearing, they actually referred to people in prison as residents on several occasions and in several conversations,
right.
Even in the one that they came over and had with the public in the warden's building. So that seems like a really more common word that's being used among the lawmakers and people who are discussing reform and criminal reform and prison reform. They're referring to people as residents, which makes a lot of sense, because when you come from prison, you know, people want to know, where have you been? And to refer to an institution as a residence versus an institution, or, you know, to be able to say that you had an address, to feel like you were a resident, because you are in fact residing in prison, serving your sentence. But that gives a person more of an identity in a place, in a wholeness, than to be called an inmate or a person who's incarcerated into a confined situation, even though having a sentence, you know, deprivation of your liberty is in fact your sentence for having committed or been convicted of a crime. But to dehumanize people and then expect them to return to a community whole, when already they've entered incarceration somewhat traumatized, either from their acts or from the acts upon them that brought them to those acts, right? So you dehumanize them further within the system of corrections and then release them to the community at a gate with a gate fee or a gate allowance or what have you. And they're sent on their way with no real ammunition or tools except what corrections has called rehabilitation. So I wanted to put that out there because residents seems to have been taken hold in our Minnesota legislature and among a lot of our people in our Second Chance Coalition people and our movements, among our advocacy, you know, in our community.
Yeah, I think we're right there. I think it's right there. And speaking of Commissioner Snow, we're very excited. He's a brilliant man, and we're very excited that he's our commissioner and getting a lot of positive things from him.
Yeah, well, he seems to be open to changing what incarceration has been and making it more effective and impactful so that we're dealing with the wholeness of people, because we want to take people who have made a mistake and help them rebuild from that, because 93% of people, 93% of the 100% of people incarcerated in the United States are coming back home to be our neighbors, to work with us, to go to church with us, to go to school with us, to be among us. And why should they be treated as such separate from us when they're going to become part of us? And if the community is going to embrace them as a whole, we need to embrace them as they're incarcerated. And this is why I posed that question about community coming into Shakopee. I know you guys have a whole format that you have to go through, but most of the time it's organizations doing that. But a lot of times we have people of experiential value who are able to come in and speak to a group of women from their experience of having been incarcerated in their reentry process, or people who are saying, you know, I'm out here and this is what it's like in the world today, because a lot of them come from incarceration after 10, 15, 20 years to social media and technology. And sometimes it's good to just talk to a normal, regular person, not the phone cell person or the tablet person or the Facebook person or the techie person, but just a normal person who's living that life right now, to say, hey, this is what's going on out there, and for them to feel like they're in a room organically having conversation with somebody from the community that's willing to just spend that time talking about what life is like out here, because it prepares them psychologically.
Okay, Michelle, I gotta stop you there.
Yeah, and then
That's the reason why I always have people write it down. I gotta stop
but
you
the
there.
last thing is the visiting policy has changed. It's changed so that you can visit 2 people in any incarceral state in Minnesota, as long as you fill out the application for them, and they don't have to be immediate family or relatives. You can visit up to 2. If they're immediate family, you can visit them, but they did
I was
change
only
the policy
asking
from
if
1
you
to
knew.
2. I want to kind of put that out there, because I know he's kind of being hit with all these questions, but.
Okay, so we
Ms.
got
Tracy.
another question, so thank you for that.
Ms. Tracy?
Yes.
I'll just note that our juvenile facility in Red Wing uses the term resident. They don't use the term offender. So our juvenile facility uses the term resident as well.
And they do in a lot of juvenile facilities, like it should be across the board.
And that helps a lot, especially for young people. Because they don't need to be labeled that, because they already are gonna have a lot of strikes against them. Do women, this is to you again, Guy, do all women have access to the transition center and transition plans, or is this based on their risk to reoffend? And if they don't have access, what do transitions look like for those women?
They all have access, and it's mandated that they go and participate.
Well, and it's twofold. So the transition center is available to everybody, and we have 2 full-time transition coordinators. They also do a lot of this work with their case manager as well when they're creating their release plans and identifying what they need to be successful upon release. We also, through a grant, the last 3 years that concluded last year in September, the Minnesota Statewide Initiative to Reduce Recidivism, or the MNSR grant, created a new form of case management that we've been now working on for 3 years. Called Integrated Case Management, or ICM it's sometimes referred to. That specific caseload, we have 1 integrated case manager in Shakopee, and that is catering specifically to higher risk women who we work with more intensely to identify what are their needs through a validated assessment, and then using our programming that we have in individual interventions to help those women sort of really get at what do you need to be successful, what are some of the goals that you have, and how can we help you feel prepared to get there. So they get prioritized for programming, specifically those programs that drive down recidivism risk, and also we have a couple of other things. We have something called the CAF, or the Combined Application Form. And that's the ability to kind of get at all of those sort of financial assistance, insurance, get all of that done, one-stop shop, 1 combined application form that we partnered with DHS on, beyond what's offered in the transition center. So we do have some specialized case management that's being piloted right now with the goal of expansion, so that everybody has the opportunity to do some of that more intensive work with a specific case manager.
Women versus men entering into the departments of corrections in Minnesota, is it my understanding that the rate is higher with the women than the men as far as entering into the Department of Corrections? Do you know? I heard something to that effect, that it was higher, the rate is higher than men right now, that we're entering it faster right now.
The population pressure statistics is growing for women faster than it's growing for men. I've heard the same thing.
Okay. And so relative to like you and you, in regards to housing, I have a group called Street Voices of Change I started a couple years ago, and it's around homelessness. Homelessness is directly a lot tied to incarceration because of lack of jobs, not being able to get into housing, then we go back to prison. It's like the quickest bed you can get in town, right? So how are we accommodating those women at those rates to get into halfway houses and housing between the both of you?
That one is a tough one to answer because it varies from person to person depending on what they need. And a lot of the times when people are in need of resources, they don't know where to go. And so getting the word out, outreach is huge for us. Like we go everywhere in order to kind of spread the word and to let people know, look, these type of resources are available to you and you can come and receive them. Do they always show up? No. A lot of the times I feel like it's embarrassing for a lot of people to come, particularly guys, to come to walk through our doors and say, I need help. But the minute that they do, we don't take that lightly because we know what it takes in order for them to even show up. As far as women, a lot of the times women are more receptive from my experience in the reentry arena. They will show up and they're like, whatever resources that you have, I'm willing to take it. And so, like I said, it varies from person to person. It's just a matter of them knowing that, one, the resources are out there for them, and two, that they could utilize it. And just knowing their short and long-term goals in order for the programming phase to be effective for them, particularly, like for that person, to be exact. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so Guy, we actually have a person that's formerly a resident of Shakopee. And when they got let go, they didn't have any information on that lovely packet that you got. So how does one get released and not know about the resources that you offer? How would that happen? How could that be possible? Because y'all know every single person that leaves there. So is
How
it not?
long ago?
How long was it?
I'm Natalie Pollard, and I was in Shakopee in October.
Had your baby.
Well,
I had my baby, yes. And thank you. And when I was released October 2017. And my case was unique because
You were
I
appealing.
appealed my case and my conviction was overturned and they released it. When I was released, like I didn't get.
But you pled to.
I pled to a lesser charge, but when I got discharged from Shakopee, I didn't get the pre-release. I didn't get the transitions fair. You know, I heard about it and was inquiring about it. Like, am I able? And they're like, no, you have to be like a few months.
We didn't, sure, you probably, I can only guess. I would say that we didn't know you were gonna get released
Right.
because you appealed.
Correct.
So your appeal was active, right, until your caseworker, so you got notified pretty quickly when you were gonna be released, because your appeal was granted, your conviction was overturned.
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
my guess would be that you weren't on our radar that you were scheduled to be released.
Right.
And that if we knew you were scheduled to be released, and then once the court says we have to release you,
Yeah.
we have to release you.
Yeah.
So we can't keep you there to make you go through transitions.
You know, I left work and everything to rush over here. I was gonna get fired. And I said, I gotta come here because I felt like there's a lot of women that I know that have been released are asking, like, Natalie, do you know of housing? Do you know of second chance jobs? Do you know? I'm like, you know what? I'm trying to utilize it. I'm trying to find the same information out for myself because, you know, it is hard to find housing off the one thing on my background. You know, they do the credit check, they do the background, you know, everything. And I've been to Amicus because I heard about Amicus when they came to Shakopee. I went to the site over south, and they just gave me like papers, like here's some numbers you can call, and here's a hygiene packet. You know, I'm like, is there referral? Right? Is there referrals that I can? You know, so I've been out now because I took the plea deal May 7th of 18, which was a lesser charge. Real quick, I was in an abusive relationship, and I had an abusive boyfriend. And one night he broke in my house and he attacked me, and I defended myself, and as a result, he passed away. So they charged me with his death, and I was also pregnant with his child. So I had to give birth. I was in Ramsey County for about 8 months, technically my whole pregnancy. I was convicted. I had 2 murder charges. I had a second-degree murder with intent, and I was acquitted on that. I was found guilty on the second-degree murder without. So they sentenced me to 128 months, which is 10 years, and 2/3 law here is 6. So I was supposed to do 6 years. As soon as I got there, I gave birth and I appealed, you know, and I sat, what was it, August of 2017 when my conviction was reversed, and I was granted the release of some Shakopee, and then I was given conditional release. And then I was on that for about 6 months. Ramsey County wanted to retry me because it's not double jeopardy when you do it on an appeal. So instead of me going to trial again and going through all that over again and possibly getting more time and being more away from my children and everything, I took a plea deal, manslaughter, and second-degree manslaughter, and I ended up getting parole for 1 year. So I'm still on parole till June of this year. I'm done. And so I've been out. You know, I'm active in my church, Wayman AME Church, right on Ocean Highway, and I try to do like domestic violence, like speeches. I work with the Prison Doula Project with Erica Garrity, doing little things with her, and also trying to work. I work at a job that pays little to nothing, but trying to just reestablish my foundation, trying to find housing, trying to better my skills and get a trade. For instance, I'm in interstate truck driving. I was taking college classes there, and I can still get the college classes from Augsburg and Inver Grove Hills. So I was doing that, but right now I'm in the trade for truck driving, interstate truck driving, so trying to get that, and then I work, but I'm still homeless. So what happened with that was my parents ended up getting custody of my children, and because the county wanted to terminate my rights, but instead of saying no, I was fighting, no, there's no reason for you guys to terminate my rights because I didn't commit a crime that affected my kids. You see what I'm saying? So, but my parents took on the responsibility of getting custody, so I transferred it over to them, but. In order for me to get my children back, I have to have stable housing, and a stable, employment, which is why I do the truck driving school, and, I'm interested in the home ownership from the incarcerated. It's all these resources I'm trying to get for other people that I know that are trying to help themselves, and I'm trying to, whatever information I know, and try to help them with the information that I get. That's why I left work and came here, because I felt that it's information, and I need to know what is it that where can I get the help from? Who can I talk to? A card, a program, a seminar, anything to be able to say, look, girl, this is what I found. This is what I found out, to share that information, and and also be able to be a better mother for my kids as well.
So, Ms. Tracy, what I would say is I think the common theme with Miss Cecilia and Miss Pollard is that they're both very active in their own success.
They are.
Right?
They are.
Now, I'll give Miss Pollard a shout out. If you want to know more about Miss Pollard, she participated in a podcast called Terrible Thanks for Asking. And it details, right? It details, she talks a lot about her stay at Shakopee, and she talks a lot about her interaction with her parole officer. So I found it very interesting when I listened to it.
And that's on your website?
No, it's an independent person, but the podcast is called Terrible Thanks for Asking.
Yeah,
It's a local woman, Nora McInerney. So
Nice.
So a lot of the times when we do receiving orientation with the new offenders that come in, we can't work harder than you do at giving you an opportunity for change. And obviously the two examples, they met us more than halfway. They went to 100% and crushed it. So, but we have some offenders that they want us to work harder at this than they are, and that's the part that we really put a lot of focus on to kind of get them to move along with us.
visitors.
Well, and I think
I think too, to his point, to kind of add to that, is like he said, a lot of the times we get people to come in through our programs and they want us to work more than them. And I always ask them, like, you're home now. Like, what type of home do you want to build? And even hearing that sometimes kind of throws them off track for a second, and they're like, oh, what do you mean home? because a lot of people, when they greet them, they don't say, hey, welcome home. Community members need to say that as much as possible to them so that they know what new home is. Rather than, there's physical prison and there's mental prison. And a lot of people deal with mental prison afterwards. And we need to help them eliminate that thought process so they feel at home. So I just wanted to add that.
Nice, that's a good one. Well, so I hope today, one of the things that we're going to be doing, and I think I mentioned this early on in our discussion, was that on the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder's website, we're building our resource page. And this is going to be one resource that we'll be offering. And the more information we're able to find out about resources, we'll share them with the community, with the loved ones, so that they'll know how to access these opportunities and they'll be able to share the wealth. Unfortunately, this is the part of the day that I hate to see come, because we have to end this part so we can get on with the rest. So let's give our distinguished panel a round of applause. Thank you so much.